All right, and we're live. Hello, everyone. So gonna be another IncusOS live stream. And if I'm slightly out of breath or also glasses looking dark and whatnot, it's because it's been snowing around here, and my office being a second building on the property. Just to get down here for this recording, I had to shovel 30-ish steps completely covered in snow. So that was interesting. Anyway, I made it just in time for the live stream, and I think I've got things mostly ready to go. So let's start with the usual looking at what happened over the past week. As a reminder, last time around, we were looking at doing some firewalling. So that has actually landed with some tweaks on the general syntax and whatnot compared to what was there last week. But we've merged that now. And there's been a few more changes since. So let's just try and find that change from last week and then go from there. All right, so must have been around here. Firewalling, there we go. That's what we're doing. So give us some cleanup. Yeah, I think that's where we're at. So yeah, last week did the system firewalling pieces. The final syntax I can actually show the API is slightly different than what was done on stream. Specifically, if we look at where's the firewall? Yeah. So the firewall rule now has an action as well as the source protocol and port. And the way things are done is there's no more default actions at the end, effectively. So if you just put firewall rules with just accepts, everything else is still accepted. So there's no real difference. But then what you would do is you put as the last rule, you can put a drop or a reject, which then blocks everything. Or you can also effectively use the firewall the other way around with just specific rejects or drops that you want and allow the rest. So just a bit more flexibility. That was easy enough to add. So we've got that in place now. All right. So after doing the firewall stuff, what did we do? Bit of cleanup on the application side, some prep work for generic WireGuard tunneling support. Community member is working on that. So we just added the tool so that the community member could actually go and test things on top of an image. And then some generic updates. I think we're updating Terraform. There's another update for where we're putting the newest tailscaler thing as well. So just applying generic updates there. Then we need a bit of tweak on how to handle Operation Center kind of self-registration. So basically, Migration Manager is now publicly available. Well, it's been publicly available for a while, but we've got a stable release now. And we intend on doing the same with Operation Center, most likely today, maybe tomorrow. And so we've been doing some cleanup around there. And one aspect we wanted to clean up is running Operation Center on top of an IncusOS system that's managed itself by Operation Center. It's kind of what we want as the general behavior. Like if you deploy Operation Center on top of IncusOS, you want its update to be managed by itself so that it actually respects its own update policy. In the past, you would need to do that by hand, by like doing a manual registration after the fact. Now we've added self-registration. So on first boot, Operation Center automatically causes IncusOS to use it for its updates. To make that work, we need to support talking to Operation Center over the Unix socket instead of the network. So that's what's been done here. And also correctly detect that we are on a system where Operation Center is installed. So for that, we need to actually expose the name of the different applications being installed so we can easily do some checking. There were some new updates to Connect CI lint we had to deal with. That's always fun. There was an issue with Oven that was reported in the forum. I'm actually reproduced that in my lab, so I actually have now an IncusOS test cluster that's like managed by Operation Center, has a migration manager, is using basically every storage option except for Ceph at this point, and it's got both local storage and Oven enabled. So kind of trying to cover kind of all the bases there and making sure we've got everything supported. And so that was fixing oven. Also tightened some of the permissions a bit. There was no reason for the root disk to be allowed to execute binaries, so we fixed that, just making it slightly harder for folks to try and attack IncusOS. And then after that, so yeah, more tweak to self-registration logic for Operation Center, more tweak around Golang C Island. Something we noticed when debugging systems that were running into some issues on initial boot or even later on is that showing the error on screen and then immediately restarting IncusOS was not really helpful because you couldn't actually read the message. So we've now added a 15 seconds timeout delay so that we can actually see the error before the binary re-execs. We've added Lego to both Operation Center and Migration Manager as they're adding Let's Encrypt support in both of those. So we've added that. As I mentioned, Tailscale got updated, so there you go. The new version of Tailscale fixes a crash when some features were missing. So a community member here followed up with a fix to undo the extra features we had to temporarily enable. And some tweak to the documentation, quite a few tweaks actually to the documentation there. And then tweaks to the tests. iSCSI, there was an issue where if you put the wrong config, you couldn't really disable it and fix it and turn it back on, so I fixed that. We had some other issues with network devices on environments with network storage, where modifying some of the network config would trigger a rescan of the storage devices, which would then hang because the network is being reconfigured. So fix that so that the network logic only ever reloads the network devices and never anything else on the system. Fixed an issue where also still in the network logic, the provider registration, so like an update to Operation Center, was spawned in the background, but with a context that was tied to a foreground action, in this case, a REST API query. And that meant that the background action was basically getting canceled every time and had no chance to ever work. So notice that issue, fixed it up. Another one that it has not been rolled out yet to stable, but people will like getting it. There was a bit of an issue with downloading and truncating the system extensions, so like the actual applications, which would, in some cases, like if the update is smaller than the current version, cause DM Verity to kind of freak out and effectively need a system reboot. So a few folks ran into that in the forum. We took us a little while to figure out exactly what's going on, but we finally fixed it. So that would be nice to get, probably with a stable update later today. Then still related to that, cleaning up some of the CSEC stuff. There was an issue with like forced update checks, not really doing much because they would try and clear the cache, but the logic to clear the cache was wrong. So they would never find any pending update effectively. That's been fixed now, so that the forced update check will actually find updates. Then another issue we've seen quite a bit is are people having machines getting stuck on starting IncusOS. And depending on the kind of image they're using, especially if they're booting like an install image from a USB stick, that can easily be because of misconfigured secure boot or TPM. And because we get stuck so early, we don't actually get to run our requirements check logic yet. So you just get a very confusing error. So Matthias moved some of that logic now to run directly in the init.rd. So the system, as soon as it boots, will be able to check, do I have secure boot, do I have a TPM? And if not, it's gonna fail very early on, so that it's obvious what's going on. And there's some more logic around there to just validate what happens effectively, that we detect the missing TPM, we show a clear message. We had a check that was validating TPM later on. Now that's not really an option anymore because it gets caught earlier, so the test doesn't make sense, we removed it. And then another issue we ran into this week, if you're using an environment with a bunch of VLANs and you want to change your VLANs, it was actually kicking everything out of the bridge when that happened. So say you have 20 VMs running, and then you go on that IncusOS network config and say, I want to also see those two VLANs. suddenly your 20 VMs are no longer on the network and they need a restart to get fixed. So we fixed that logic to be less aggressive with how we reset network. That can have some negative consequences in some cases, but for this situation, like just adding or removing VLANs, it will work just fine. And that's basically where we're at. One thing I could show is my current lab, because that's been evolving a bit. Let me get a terminal up. There we go. And if I go onto my lab, okay, slightly too much stuff. There we go. That's what I'm currently running. Like, there's a bunch of stuff that's not really relevant. Like, I've been doing some SLNX work, so there's a VM for that. There's the VMs I use for kernel development and testing. They're here. I've got a TrueNAS VM running that is actually relevant. That provides both iSCSI and NVMe over TCP targets that I can play with on my test cluster. And then Windows 11, Windows 11 for ARM, mostly for various testing of drivers and agents and stuff. And then some kind of customer-related VMs that are running there. So for the cluster itself, I've got 3 IncusOS servers for the main nodes, and then Migration Manager, Operation Center also running. If we go look at the config for one of those, each of the compute nodes effectively, so 4 CPU, 16 gigs of RAM, nothing too weird there. They do get they get 2 disks, I think. Yeah, so they get the root disk, 80 gigs, so that I've got a bit of space on the main disk. Then they get a shared disk, so that kind of simulates what you would get with like fiber channel mostly. That's kind of what we go for as far as simulation. And then there's another disk that gets attached, which is for use with LinStore. So that's local storage that then gets made available for over the network. On the network side, one end of this stuff goes into an oven network. And on the other side, I've got also another network interface that connects to physical networking to test VLANs and that kind of stuff. So it ticks a lot of the boxes as far as the features you'd kind of expect for testing a lot of that stuff. Now, just fixing something off screen that I forgot to fix earlier. Hopefully that will do the trick. Okay, there we go. And now the way that actually looks like, if we go in the cluster, so I've not created DNS records yet, but hopefully I can find them. Yeah, and hopefully they're all allowed access. Yeah, okay, there we go. So that's the operation center for that deployment. We can see the 3 IncusOS, the 3 Incus VMs, Migration Manager, Operation Center. Everything's over IPv6, even though technically the whole lab is dual stack. And we can see there is a cluster here that's defined. And we also pulled the general inventory. So if we can go look at, okay, there's no images, but the instances running on that cluster, we can go and look at those. Same thing for profiles, projects, or the network stuff, like everything is in there basically. So that's Operation Center for that lab environment. And then what I mostly care about here will be the cluster. So if we do clusters and open this guy, sure. Okay, so that's the Incus cluster running. I'll zoom in a tiny bit. And if we go look at on the networking side, here we can see all 3 machines have the same external network interface. We can see it here available as a straight up bridge. Then we've created VLAN devices for 2 of the VLANs on top of that. And then there's an Incus BR0 that's cluster-wide, Mesh BR0 that's also cluster-wide for internal services. And then oven, there's an oven network that uses, I think, Incus BR0 as its uplink. So there's a good mix of networking stuff. And then on the storage side, there's also a good mix of stuff. So I've got local storage on ZFS on all 3 machines. So we can see the current storage availability there on local storage. And then we've got a remote storage pool, which that's the one that pretends to be fiber channel effectively. Then we've got another storage pool that's also remote storage, this one over IncusOS, and then another one over NVMe over TCP. So you can see that those are up and running. And then we've got linstore as well, which is set up in that environment. So storage-wise, the only thing I'm missing at this point as far as what's supported on top of IncusOS would be Ceph. I'm looking at adding that, but yeah, that's the only thing that's really missing. If we go look at instances, so those are the test instances I've got running on the main project, and there's a other project running which then has both the linstore and oven control plane running, and that uses our mesh BR0 bridge to effectively not require oven but still provide cluster. That's basically that. And this particular thing doesn't have a PV4. I think they're all on V6. Yeah, the screen is too small. Really? There we go. So you can see those are running, and if we go, look at linstore, not the console terminal. Linstore Novi. There we go. So we can see the three machines are in it. I can play with all of the storage config and whatnot. And then same thing for oven. So I just need to do kind of the same thing with more instances here to handle Ceph and provide additional disks to different machines, expose them as Ceph OSDs, and then run the Ceph OSD manager monitors at least in there. Then the cluster can also get Ceph, and we'll have basically everything covered. The other thing I still need to do with that cluster is like proper DNS names and centralized authentication authorization. So OpenID Connect and OpenFGA. But anyways, there's a question from Jared of like, did you change your glasses or did they change color on their own? Technically both. So I didn't change my glasses just now. They do change color, but also my normal pair of glasses have been so scratched up over the past decades that I switched to my backup pair, which is what I'm running, what I've been wearing now for the past week, I think. I don't love them. They're definitely a backup pair. They're pretty heavy and stuff compared to my normal ones. I need to actually place an order and get new glasses. But yeah, I usually use the color changing stuff. It's I've got quite a bit of issues with like photosensitivity, especially. So when shoveling snow outside, when super bright, and then coming back inside, it's nice having glasses that can usually within a minute or so change color to accommodate and not have to deal with sunglasses and dealing with those all the time. Okay, so that's for basically what happened over the past week and a view as to kind of what the lab looks like. So like I also have a migration manager in there. I did reset it last night because I was testing something for a customer. So I don't think there's anything exciting in there. If we load this guy up, yeah, it basically has no source, no targets at the moment. So anyways, there's a migration manager up and running, and I do have an ESXi VM as well in that environment that runs a bunch of stuff, but it's currently offline because it uses a bunch of CPU for nothing, so I just only run it when I need to do test migrations. Anyways, OIDC, so that's kind of the topic for today. Let's talk about that a bit and then see what we can do about it, because that's kind of two different things. If we look at the issue, OIDC, there we go. So for anyone who's played with IncusOS or even with Incus to an extent, you're probably familiar with our TLS-based authentication. I personally quite like it. It works a lot like what you would expect SSH. It's just about as strong. You can back TLS certificates by a bunch of different things. They could be backed by a TPM. They can be stored like on a separate HSM. They can be managed by web browsers. It's pretty nice and flexible, but it's also not very usual. Most people are kind of used to, login password and you're done, which is something we've never really wanted to deal with. And I think, some of the stuff around Operation Center and whatnot is starting to make it clear why we didn't. We don't want you to go in there and then look at clusters, and you're in an environment with like 200 clusters, and each of them have their own local authentication authorization, and you need to like keep them all in sync. It's a complete disaster. It might work fine for something small, like really designed to be small. Like if it's just single cluster or single machine and you've got login and password on that, sure, that's manageable. But our stuff is designed to really work at much larger scale, and that's never felt a particularly good fit. The other thing is I don't like the idea of having information I don't strictly need. I don't really want to know people's first name and last name and email address and all that kind of stuff in the Incus database. That just starts making it having personal identifiable information. And that might mean that now there's some data retention policy around that for the Incus database, or that we need to deal with, potentially a GDPR request, right, to be forgotten, that kind of stuff. So we've usually pushed that problem externally, effectively being like, either use a TLS certificate, at which point you're just a fingerprint, we don't know who you are, which is what you can see here, like I'm logged in as a certificate. Or you connect externally through OpenID Connect, and that's what it looks like if I use like one of my production clusters. I can do login with SSO, it goes to my OIDC provider, goes through the login, and then you actually see who you are. But again, Incus never actually records that. Incus just shows it to you, but internally it's never recorded. There's no database record or anything for that. So that's kind of the experience for OIDC. Now the problem is a lot of people who want to try IncusOS at home, they don't have an OpenID Connect Identity Provider running. That's not a thing that everyone runs at home just for fun. And while you can use public ones to an extent, it's not trivial to set up. You usually need to go into like developer accounts and create a bunch of stuff. Like you can technically use GitHub as your OpenID Connect Identity Provider, and you might be able to even get Incus to talk to that directly. Same thing with Google Workspace, same thing with some others. I was going to say Microsoft Entra, but actually that one does not work because Microsoft does not respect the OpenID Connect spec, so it doesn't actually work with Incus. So what we're thinking of, like the focus on the onboarding user experience, right now what it looks like is you go here and then it asks for your certificate, or you can generate one, which then fills in the field for you and gives you the certificate. That's still kind of rough, especially for anyone trying to just do it through the web browser for most of their interactions. So what I'd like to do is offer a second option there, like effectively either go through the TLS client certificate, or you can go through OIDC, and there you kind of have two options. And I'm not sure if I'm going to expose them actually in the UI or not. But basically, option one is just give us your forum username, and we'll configure Incus to log in with that. Option two is I've got my own OIDC. I know the identity provider, client ID, and all that stuff. I'm going to provide those details. Please use that. That's the more advanced version of the first one. And down the line, you actually want to go to a third option, which is going to be even nicer, but that's going to take a bit of effort on our side. If I find my issues here, which is this guy, we want to get to the point where we can deploy IncusOS with a full Incus stack. So deploying Incus and then deploying on top of Incus Oven, potentially Linstore, Ceph, but also OpenID Connect, OpenFGA, Loki, Prometheus, Grafana, and some kind of reverse proxy. And at that point, that means that you would take the I want a full setup checkbox when downloading the image, boot it onto your machine. It will take some amount of time to download and set up everything, but then it will literally log, okay, I've created a temporary admin account for you. That's the admin login and password. Go on this URL, log in, you're done. So that's really the goal. But that's going to take us a few months to get there. So the intermediate step is literally running a public OpenID Connect endpoint that all IncusOS systems that are internet connected can point to, and then have a way to easily say which account is valid or not. There's kind of two ways to do it. One way is we just run a completely standalone OIDC IDP just for that. So personally, for my own stuff, I've been using Zetatel now, which works pretty well. We could run another instance of that, integrated with the usual suspects, so like, Google Workspace, Microsoft Entra, GitHub, GitLab, LinkedIn. I think that's basically what we usually do. And when you download the image, you then be able to provide your email address. And when you then try to log into Incus on the web UI, it would bounce you back to our SSO service. It would ask you to log in with one of those accounts. Doesn't matter, so long as the email address lines up, you'll get logged in as admin into Incus. That's one of the options, and that might still be how I end up doing it. I'm not 100% sure. The other option, which I would prefer, but might be a bit of a pain to implement, is straight up integrating with the forum. So instead of asking you to log into your account directly, it would you would effectively go to Incus. It would bounce you back to a page that just says like, hey, we'd like to log you in with your forum account. And you say yes, and there you're in. So effectively logging in through your forum username. All of those have a bit of a security problem, obviously, which is you're relying on a third party for your authentication. Like I, as the admin of that stuff, could spoof you no problem. Now, I could only do that if your system was exposed to the internet, which it might not be. And the goal behind this is not to provide something that people would use in production over months. It's to provide a easy kind of stepping stone where like you just do that, you get easy access to it, you can get familiar with it, and then get familiar enough to deploy your own OpenID Connect IDP on top of that Incus system potentially, and then change it over to that and use that to authenticate from that point on. So that's kind of the idea. And yeah, Jared mentions using Ophelia. Like there's quite a few of those OIDC IDPs now, especially in Go. For the longest time, we were using Keycloak, which is a massive part of Java, but that was kind of the go-to. But these days, yeah, you've got Authentic, Zetadal, Ophelia. There's a bunch of good options there. There's another option, I think it's called Dex, that I was looking into for like something very minimal. Because basically what I would like in this scenario is really running as simple an OIDC provider as possible with a single backend, and the backend being the forum. The thing that's annoying with the forum is that it does not do OIDC. There is it's got its own protocol called the Discourse SSO connector or something like that, which we use elsewhere already. And it works, but it's not OIDC, so I need to kind of do a bridge or a plugin or something. And I don't necessarily want to get through all of the effort of contributing a full backend to one of the big OIDC IDPs just for using a Discourse forum. I might look at something simpler that I can just write effectively a setup that's fixed single backend just for our use, and go with that. That's what actually got me thinking that the best path forward might actually be to use the OpenID Connect provider I wrote for our test suite in Incus. So we've got something called Mini OIDC, which is what we use in our test suite. So it's like as dumbed down simple an OpenID Connect provider as you can possibly make, which uses mostly Citadel as library, I think, to run. If we look at Mini OIDC, yeah, we load Citadel OIDC, and this one is actually too dumb for what we want with the forum. All this one does is literally it accepts everyone. So you just run that code, and any attempt against it will always succeed. And you can just choose what user it should put in the ID token based on what the content of a text file on disk. That makes it very easy for our test suite because we can just write to that file, I want to be admin, and then do a login attempt. Now we're going to be admin. We can test OpenFGA access and everything. And then we want to try, now I'm just like regular Joe. So you can say, okay, now return Joe as my user. And the next login attempt looks like that. Makes it very easy to play with. The good thing is that the code is like as simple as it gets, like 200 lines for effectively an OpenID Connect provider. So we might be able to reuse that to make a custom OIDC proxy effectively, where all it does is anyone who talks to it always accept it. We don't check the URLs, we don't check the redirect URLs, we don't check any of that stuff because we have no idea what people are going to be doing. Basically, all client IDs are treated as valid. It doesn't matter. And what we would care about are probably OIDC, what's the terminology again? I think they are technically claims. No, they're scopes, OIDC scopes. So normally when you configure your OpenID Connect, you've got some standard scopes. You've got OpenID, which gets you just, are you logged in type thing, like a user ID. You've got profile, which gets you first name, last name. There's email that gets you email address. There's a few extra scopes like that. And yeah, effectively, if you use, like, you can define custom scopes. So my current thought is to have extra scopes that would literally be like Incus colon and then the forum username to say, okay, yes, I'm using the same IDP as everyone else, but the scope says that you should only grant me an ID token if the user that's authenticating is in this group or is this username effectively. So that would let us not have to roll to have everyone roll either OpenFGA or a scripted config to filter who can log in into their environment by effectively just abusing a scope for that. That's the current idea. So just trying to keep it as simple as possible, because then that means that in the IncusOS image customizer, we can ask, okay, do you want to do, forum-based login? Yes. What's your username? Put the username, download the ISO, you're done. And in the ISO, all that we would have is initial Incus config, points to the IDP's public URL with the right set of scopes. One of those scopes is what username we're expecting to see. And then the IDP sees that scope, validates it with the user logging in, and if it's valid, gives them an ID token, returns that. So that's kind of the idea. It's just checking some of the chats there. There was also Jared mentioning that like Citadel and Ophelia are the ones that are certified as far as the OpenID spec. And yeah, that's why Incus uses Citadel for its client. We were looking at a few ones at the beginning. Citadel didn't have the best API. We didn't like it so much, but it was certified. So that was one of the reasons for doing that. And if I go with the mini OIDC kind of code base, technically it is using Citadel OIDC behind the scenes, so that would also all be using the certified stuff. One of the catches of it being completely spec compliant is that it doesn't work with Microsoft Entra. Because as it turns out, Microsoft Entra is not OIDC compliant. One of its timestamp fields, I think, it's supposed to return effectively a Unix epoch, I think, as an integer, and they return it as a string, which then breaks and effectively causes the OIDC stack inside of Incus to just straight up reject login, which is kind of annoying. But technically, it's Microsoft's fault. I don't know if they're gonna ever fix it. I see. Yeah, Victor also mentioning the ones he tested, like with Keycloak, Authentic, Ophelia, some of the LDAP ones directly, and Canidum or whatever it's called. I don't know that one. You want to good documentation? Yeah, like there's so many of them really, and some of them are trying to do kind of too much. That's some of my complaint to understand with like something like Authentic. It's trying to do, it does more than just being an IDP. It also tries to do some proxying of, I think, authorization layer, all that kind of stuff, which is perfectly fine. Like it's great to have that in some environments, not in this particular one. In this particular one, we want something as done as possible. All right, so let me maybe show you just what I mean as far as getting access. So one thing we could do for fun is actually with this cluster, try and get it working with OIDC. So if we were to do that with Zetadel, the way that would look like, so if I go on mine, UI console, here we go, and I've got a bunch of internal stuff, projects here. Which one was I using for testing again? Might have been probably internal stuff, maybe. WordPress Grafana, yeah, it was probably one of those. So the idea is like you would make like Incus everyone, and then I'm trying to remember what the normal config is, so I can skip that crap here. Incus everyone, application type. Let me actually check what I've done in the past. It will be easier. So if I take one of the public ones there, oh, I might actually have used the demo creds. That would make sense. Is that what I used? Yeah, probably. Okay, instead of creating a new one here, let's just repurpose this guy. So we've got a client ID, user agent code, that's all fine. Token, JSON web token is what we want. Redirect. Yeah, exactly. So this one is already configured for that. It effectively does a globe pattern on both the callback and logout to allow everything. To make that work, you need to run it in development mode because this is not spec compliant, and it's also usually a bad idea from a security standpoint. But in this particular case, we don't actually care, and that's fine. Those are the URLs for just configuring the client. So let's see, in theory, if I grab this client ID and I go in my cluster here, config, config settings, and we want to look at the OIDC stuff. There we go. So client ID, this guy, save, issuer. So this and scopes. I think the default ones will actually work just fine. Just gonna keep it that way. And actually the claim to get for the username, we should do preferred username. That should be fine. There. Okay, now let's try to access this thing again, but not with the client certificate. So let's do a new session. Okay, login with SSO. There we go. That's gonna be slightly frustrating. Yeah, my SSO provider doesn't have local logins, and I don't really feel like going through the whole login dance, but I guess I'm gonna have to. Fine, let's do that. So let's log in with Google Workspace then. Okay, that one's second factor, cool. So now Google Workspace login is cleared, and that's we're gonna get into, into Citadel, which then also wants second factor. There we go, and we're on the cluster with the correct preferred username set. So that works just fine. And I said, like, we could do that effectively publicly. The main catch with doing it publicly would be trying to put some constraints. Citadel has a scripting option that I've already made use of here for actions, which is how I actually get my preferred username claim set correctly by deriving it from the preferred login name. We can do that. I didn't find a good way to catch additional scopes in that flow to be able to check, like, okay, well, what's your username? What are the scopes that are set? Do any of them match your username? Yes, okay, fine, go through. No, okay, we throw an error. I didn't find a good way to do that. So if going down the Citadel route, we would probably need to provide, as part of that seed config, a scriptlet authorization provider config, which would then do the enforcement for the username on the client side, so on the Incus side instead of on the IDP side. So that's an option. I think I'm currently leaning more towards using the Discourse Connect SSO API thing. Let's see if I can actually show you how that one works. For the few of you that have access to the Linux Containers Lab, you've gone through already. So yeah, I'm already logged in. Great. I guess I'm gonna have to burn that key afterwards. But basically, yeah, this. So if I go to this from, see, from an incognito session, not portal, just slash. Yeah, that bounces you to the login page of the forum, and then if you're logged into that, then you get you get logged in and get access. Yeah, don't forget to burn the key. Yeah, I know. I don't even know if my key works because I obviously don't need to ever use that VPN for my own lab. It's only for community members that we really need to do that. So I don't think I actually do need that key, and I don't think I've actually made it valid as a result of that. But I'm still like looking at it off screen to just be like, let's go and burn this thing, just in case. thought this was the correct server. I guess you could try it. Well, I mean, if more than one of you tries it at the same time, then it's not gonna work for anyone. That's the beauty of WireGuard. Yeah, I see the WireGuard keys here. What's a good way to just trigger a regen of that? I guess I can do it this way. There. He no longer works. So yeah, my current temptation here is to go with the mini OIDC approach, effectively running our own OIDC provider and then implement the login method to use that discourse SSO login, because that would be kind of the tightest integration. Like, we already want most people to have an account on the forum so that they can get support, they can chat with us. Login to the forum is very easy because we support many login options. So if we can tie that kind of cloud login thing to also using the forum accounts, that would make everything nice and tight. Also makes it easier if you want to potentially allow like someone you know on the forum or something to go look at your system. You just need their username. You can allow them pretty easily. That'd be nice. So to try and make that work, I guess the first thing we should do is just get that code base and see if we can get it running on its own, get Incus talking to it, and then once it does, see about expanding it to actually talk to the forum's API. So that's kind of the idea. That test cluster, I don't actually need it to use that login option anymore, so I can clear that. Reset to default, save. Reset to default, save, and nah, no more SSO for now. And where is it? That is here. Projects, cloud, demo. Yep, don't need this guy anymore. There, so nobody plays with it. Cool. Now, if I go, where am I gonna do that? I can just do it in my root directory. I don't actually need to go be in the IncusOS code base or anything. Just like, if we use the forum, a question would be how much logging there is in the forum. Nothing that would be particularly relevant, I think, in this case, because the proxy itself wouldn't log anything. I don't see any reason for it to log anything. And so on the forum side, you would basically just get a normal log entry saying, like, basically you loaded the front page. That's kind of what it looks like in the forum log. It doesn't really get you much details there that's particularly relevant. It's actually kind of noisy the way it logs. Like, it does log one line per request, but it logs kind of a bit of a stack trace, which is not that useful. Like, basically the discourse logs are not super useful in my opinion. So I'm not too worried about that. Like, 99% of people who are gonna use this stuff won't use it on machines that are publicly exposed to the internet. And the reality is that if they do, and they are worried about some people being able to spoof their login, well, as it turns out, the same people running the forum are the ones who built the image running on your system, so you kind of have to trust them already. Anyways, this is also gonna be like for anyone who cares, really, they should be moving to their own IDP, whether it's running on top of the Incus cluster or some other system they already have, or using like another generic IDP they can use. Like, anyone can sign up for Auth0 and some of those others and run them on the free tier and make that work pretty easily. It's only when you want like a bunch of extra services or a bunch of extra accounts that it starts costing money usually. All right, so let's try to get just a copy of that code base from the Incus test suite and see if we can make this work. So mini YDC, it's here. Let's see if we can just build this thing as it is. Okay, fine. let's pretend it's in the IncusOS already. IncusOS command discourse or IDC or something. Sure. Let's do that. Okay, can we build this guy now? Yay, okay. So at least for the basics, it does run. Well, it does build at least. Running it, yeah, it crashes immediately. It's a test binary. It's not meant to be smart. Port is the first argument, and then user-fi is the second if specified. Okay, fine. Search my user and then run. What's the name of the binary? Discourse or IDC. On 1, 2, 3, 4, and then my user. Okay, so that's running. Now what am I gonna do with that? Because normally I would just configure my Incus to talk to it, but my local Incus has OIDC and OpenFGA configured, so that won't work super well. Let me see, what does it actually listen on? Does it only listen on the loopback or on all interfaces, or what does it do? Yeah, only loopback. Okay, well, let's fix that. Mini OIDC. Okay, yeah, that's not gonna work so well. So we need to pass an argument to actually give it a IP address or something to listen on. Let's just make the first parameter be an address instead of just a port. Okay. Then so this becomes an address here instead of a port. There we go. And we pass that to setup, which presumably needs the same tweak. Where's the setup function? Yeah. Sure. So this one will just run on that. Fine. And finally, the more interesting piece. So that becomes, yeah, the address. Like that. And then there should be a socket somewhere, I guess. Here we go. Address plus port, HTTP server. Okay. So that should also turn into just an address. Okay, so that worked. Now let's see if it actually runs. So what's my IPv6 address on this machine? This guy, I guess, should work. Discourse or ADC. Then I want this guy on port 1, 2, 3, 4, and still my user. Okay, so something needs some more parsing. Fun. Oh, there's still a 127 in there that I missed. Where? Mini IDC. Oops. I'm confused. That's in the test code path. Did I rebuild this thing right? Yeah, I did. Okay. All right. So something is still doing localhost even if though I didn't ask it to. Let's see. Setup function. I wrote this thing a long time ago in case that wasn't clear. HTTP server address handler. Okay. That's just a basic HTTP server. What's the problem with that? Okay. Debug by printf. I just want to make sure we actually do get to that point and that the address is what I expect it to be, just to make sure. I don't like that. What do you mean you're done building it? I just literally changed the file. Oh, okay. Yeah, I know what's going on. Never mind. That makes sense. I am an idiot. That's what's going on. No, I don't think there's a mention of localhost in there. I think it's much simpler than that. I mean, there's some mention of localhost elsewhere, but that's not really the problem. The problem is here. Like we're actually importing the other package, but not from the right place. So we want to import from IncusOS, IncusOSD, CMD, this course IDC, I think what it's called, and then import menu IDC from there. Okay, now it rebuilt. Now let's see. Cool, that's better. It runs on 1234 on my IPv6 address. There we go. Cool. So I don't remember if there's a built-in client ID or how that stuff works. Let me try and find out. Yeah, Incus device clients called device, I think. So that would mean that the client ID is called device. Just see if that lines up with the tests, but that seems likely. Git grep OIDC client in tests. Yep, device is the client name, sure. That's kind of confusing, frankly. Let's call it foo for now. Because we also have an API route for device, so that's why it's kind of confusing. I'd rather it be a distinct name. Okay, this is running now. And let's go back to this cluster here. And I don't know if it can actually route to my desktop, so that's going to be an interesting one to try, but we'll see. So we said foo for the client ID. And that's actually the other thing, that we could use the client ID format to tell who exactly is allowed. We could use that instead of the scopes. That's another option. Anyways, now for the address on 1234, save. Okay. And now let's see if it actually works. Do not do certificate authentication, login with SSO. Well known has failed. Okay. Sure. Let me just check if that works locally. If so, then it's probably a firewall thing somewhere. Oh, no, it's simpler than that. Yeah. I'm trying to do it over HTTPS. There's no HTTPS yet. Yeah, so I just need to go here, change that to HTTP. That should take care of that. Save. Now let's try accessing the cluster again from here. Nope. Login with SSO. Issuer does not match. That's quite plausible that it does not match. Let's see. What do we actually return as the issuer? Okay, issuer has a slash at the end of it. Does not matter. Who knows? But let's try it. Save. And let's try that again. Request redirect UI is missing in client config. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Well, makes sense. We probably do have some kind of filtering for that on the server side. Let me check the client code. Yeah, there we go. Not redirecting, request UI is missing. If you have any questions, make contact, OIDC error, type request, OIDC redirects disabled true, auth request scopes, OpenID Connect, okay. Auth request redirect UI. Okay, let's see how that works, because I, again, still don't remember how any of that code works. Do we have configuration on the redirect stuff in here anywhere? Oh, it's not in Git yet. Fine. Nope, we do not. So how does that actually work? Or maybe it doesn't. Hold on a sec. So there are two code paths in Incus. There's one code path you hit if you use the web UI, and there's one code path you hit if you use the CLI. My feeling is that this test mini YDC thing never needed to do the web UI because we only test this through the CLI in the tests. So it's quite possible that the cluster actually works perfectly fine if you add it to the CLI instead of the UI. So let's try that. Add OIDC test, this guy. Not sure why it keeps getting some quotation marks every time, but sure. Yep, this time it shows a code for authentication. And it gets automatically approved because that's what MiniUIDC does. It just says yes to everyone. So that worked. And now I should be able to, so if I do info on that cluster, user, of username is empty, of method is OIDC. Why is of username empty? And what claim do we use for this stuff? I guess I'm missing something here. Let me just go check in our tests again. So IDC dot client ID device. So those are used, for example, here, also in the cluster, but actually I wonder this one. Let's see. Device. Okay. Oh no, never mind. I'm just being an idiot. You know that my user file I touched? Yeah, as it turns out, if you touch it and you don't put a name in it, then you don't end up with a name. So that makes sense. So if I put hello world in there, and then right now if I do info, we're still using a cached token, so it's still the old name. But if I remove this guy and then add it back, sure. Now it says that for this code, it's using hello world. And if I do this, there we go. Okay, so, I mean, not a big surprise, the mini OIDC we're using in our test suite does function. Now the trick is, can we, well, first make it work with web login? Because if it's just CLI, that's not super useful. So we need to actually get that part of it functional. And then need to also add an actual backend. So as I said, as you can see currently, it just allows everything, which is not exactly what you want for the web login method. So if we go look, we effectively, yeah, so user code handler, there we go. So we grab the code from the user and we basically just complete it immediately saying everything is fine, and then return. That's not how we actually want to do for production. We'd want that to hook into the discourse SSO login method. Do I have that code that I can show nearby for what I've done for the VPN? I might have it. Is it in here somewhere? I don't see it. Yeah, VPN portal code is not here. Is it on my laptop? Yeah, it is. Okay, cool. So VPN portal, and I would like the of discourse. There we go. That's what we need for the discourse login. It's not that difficult, honestly. There's a bunch of crypto crap to do for the signature because they're using like an HMAC with a secret that you define in the discourse API. Yeah, and there's a mention of PKC. Yeah. Normally, yes, that's how we support PKC on the client side, on the Incus side. That's also how we would want to do it. Ideally, in this case, I don't remember if I've got it already in mini OIDC or not. But yeah, we're not using, and usually don't like using any of the legacy flows for authentication. Yeah, so on the discourse side, basically, login handler is, I think, is that the redirection? Okay, so that's what we use to redirect the user to. So the user who tries to authenticate, we send them that way, with a call, effectively a callback to us, and then on the callback, we get here, and we can start extracting a bunch of details about the actual user, and then fill in effectively a user struct, and we're effectively done. So we need to hook that into the MinIDC flow, so that when you log in, instead of it just saying, yes, you're good, it actually bounces you to the forum, makes you authenticate there, redirects back, at which point it knows who you are, and sends it through. Part of the fun is going to be to handle the refreshes. We don't want to force users to go back to the forum every time there's a refresh happening. So we'll have to see how it actually works. Can we, do we get effectively, I mean, we might just not bother, honestly, because normally what you would want to do in like a production environment is you would want a pretty short refresh timeout, so that if a user gets locked or deleted, for example, you're letting someone go from your company, you want their access to expire pretty quickly, but you don't want them to have to log in every 30 seconds. You just want a cheap, is this user still valid check effectively in the backend that can happen, and then a refresh token is issued and you move on. That makes sense in most environments. In this one, it doesn't really, because we won't have individual clients that we could use to revoke, to revoke a specific token for. The only thing that could happen is, we could check, is the forum account still valid? Like, as in, did we lock out or delete that forum account? But that's not super likely to be relevant anyways, for this particular use case. Like, if you have a home lab, you're logging into the forum, and then you abuse the forum and we lock your account, that shouldn't prevent you from logging in, from still having a valid token to your home lab to log in. So I don't see a need for us to be able to immediately invalidate local login effectively. So I think we're probably gonna ignore the refresh thing. Basically, if you ask for a refresh and the token you're providing was valid, if the ID token itself is still valid, then you're good. And we'll probably make the ID token expire after, I don't know, a week or something, so that you do need to log in again every so often, but there's no need to very aggressively try to check if the user is valid or not. One thing we could do in theory is effectively make the refresh logic look at a local file for whether a particular combination has been revoked on purpose. So the example there would be someone telling us, okay, well, for some reason my token got compromised, someone got a copy of it, and I don't want them to be able to log into my lab. Okay, we could specifically revoke something. I don't know to actually care, honestly. Like, this thing is not designed to be super secure, it's designed to be super convenient. If you want secure, run your own IDP. Don't trust us with it. And we're gonna try and make that pretty clear, I think, in the UI documentation, that this is a convenience. We really don't want people to depend on cloud login as much as possible. So you should move to your own or use TLS certificates to avoid this. All right, I think that's about it, because the rest is going to be a bunch of me messing around with being like, well, maybe they leaked their token during a YouTube live stream. Like, well, yeah, I mean, that kind of happened, but like, you kind of need, like, you need to start catching the wrong file and for that on purpose. It's not something you would normally see on a normal web page, at least. So that's that. But yeah, I think that's basically the plan. Is I'll take that code base, I'll try and see if I can jam our existing Discourse SSO login method into that. And if so, then I can just run that pretty cheaply, either directly on the box that runs the forum, or just as a microservice next to it, to just handle kind of those kind of logins. And that will provide basic cloud login for anyone using Incus who wants to use the forum to log in. and then as soon as they can spawn their own IDP of choice, they should move over to that. And if anything, we've seen through the chat today that there's a lot of opinions around like what IDPs to use and all of the different options. I find it pretty interesting that we moved pretty quickly from there being no good options when we kind of started doing that stuff with LexD at the time. Like if you wanted a self-hosted IDP and you wanted it to support some of the modern stuff, so PKC, code authentication and like, there was basically Keycloak. Or you could use Auth0 for like a hosted platform. And that was basically it. You couldn't use Entra directly, you couldn't use GitHub directly, you couldn't use Google Workspace directly because none of them did device code authentication flows correctly. I believe they've all fixed it by now. And the other options were, yeah, pretty limited as far as what you could deploy that would actually support any of that stuff. Whereas now we've got quite a lot. And I think a bunch of that kind of happened from the development we've seen over the past few years of the solutions like Tailscale and NetBird and the like, where like they're really trying to do more of the zero trust mesh VPN plus built-in authentication provider to an extent, or making it easy for you to use your own. And yeah, that's definitely developed a lot, I think, over the past 2-3 years. And it's interesting to see that like every time someone asks on the forum, basically, I discover yet another IDP that's now being actively used. So pretty interesting stuff. I'm hoping we've got this one sorted out pretty quickly. I mean, maybe this week, maybe next week, just to remove that bit of friction in the IncusOS kind of getting started workflow. I think that's currently the biggest bump we've seen in getting in people's way. When we do demos and that kind of stuff, it's also the thing that's the weirdest. Like, you know, every time I access my forum or something and it's like, hey, do you want to use your client certificate? I mean, that's fine, but that's something that's kind of unusual. People don't necessarily know what that means, what they need to do around it. So at least for the web login kind of side of things, being able to just go through normal authentication, whether it's like, you know, Google, Microsoft, LinkedIn, just a local forum account, whatever, and then getting let in, that will feel a lot more familiar to folks. And then if you combine that with using Let's Encrypt, now you can easily get proper DNS records with proper TLS certificates, with proper authentication, all pretty easily. All right. I think we're good with this one. I was checking the chat for anything else, but I think we're basically done. And there's a mention of like authorization still feels a bit arcane with OpenFGA. Well, I mean, OpenFGA is a great backend. The problem is that you need stuff to integrate with it to actually make it work better. There's some stuff we need to do for like more fine-grained delegation type scenarios within OpenFGA so that we can run an OpenFGA HA cluster effectively with a bunch of different stores for different systems and manage all of that. There's some work we're looking at doing around that to make it more flexible on the Incus side. And then part of our goal for Operation Center as well is to have it handle some of the OpenFGA kind of bootstrapping side of things, so like creating the store automatically, adding initial access. But then after that, typically you want some kind of synchronization between your backend user access database and OpenFGA. So like for our customers, it's typically a tiny bit of Go that connects to like Microsoft Entra on one side and OpenFGA on the other, and just synchronizes the groups effectively. Like it's got a list of groups that matter, and those get synced into OpenFGA. The reason for that is pretty straightforward. Like OpenFGA's goal is to be as fast as possible. Like there's no caching, there's no nothing. The intent is that all its clients send every single authorization request every time to it. So if you do like an Incus list on a cluster using OpenFGA, every single line you're seeing has gone through OpenFGA at least once. And we don't do any caching because it's not meant to. It's meant to support like tens of thousands of queries per second, specifically for that. but that means it can't itself go out and do lookups for groups and that kind of stuff because it would become insanely slow. So you need to feed it and you need to keep it up to sync externally, writing effectively bridges to pull information in. We found that like in an enterprise environment that works pretty well because with like while Entra is pretty common for the OIDC side of things, oftentimes the customers don't actually want to use Entra groups for authorization into the virtualization platform. If you're doing like a full GitOps type model thing, the access control to the cluster itself is more likely to be tied to your ticketing system than it is your actual directory. So effectively, if someone needs to have direct access to an instance to go and fix it or go and debug it, they need to file a ticket. They need to have that ticket reference the instance they need, the level of access they need, and when that gets approved, that gets pulled into OpenFGA. They get access. When the ticket closes, the access is revoked, and typically the instance is marked as being dirty, needing redeployment. So that's what we are seeing like on the more modern side of things, where it's a lot less so of like, oh, I've got this group in my directory and I just want to give them access to this entire project. It tends to be a lot more fine-grained. It tends to be along the lines of giving exec access to an individual instance for X amount of time to this specific user. So yeah, that's like we've got that flexibility mostly on the Incus side. The model is pretty flexible. OpenFGA provides the very quick way to validate access, and then the complexity tends to be into feeding the right stuff into OpenFGA. So that's why you tend to write some API bridges and like synchronization tools and whatnot to actually make sure that its view of groups and access for those groups and access for individual users is all correct. So anyways, I expect we're going to see some development around that. Like the part of the intent is for a bunch of those kind of scripts and synchronization bits for OpenFGA. That should really all become public. It would be nice if that could even be part of the OpenFGA project. That is like a framework with a bunch of plugins for some of the most common stuff. And then you can grab that, configure it, and run that in the backend as a bridge to actually pull access and make sure that your list of groups and all of the access rules and everything is correct at all times. All right, I'm gonna leave it there. Thanks a lot for watching. This was definitely a lot more of a show and tell, rambly type live stream than a getting stuff done and writing code, unlike last week. But hopefully that gives you a good idea of what we're planning on doing, and then I can go and do that in the backend. As we've seen with Jared mentioning earlier, one of the downsides with doing some of that kind of work is the likelihood of adding it's the likelihood of showing secrets on screen, which then becomes problematic. So that's why I don't actually want to do the integration with the forum and all that kind of stuff on stream, because I will at some point for sure leak some admin token or something of the forum. So I don't really want to do that. But now that you've seen kind of what it looks like as far as the different pieces and how they fit together, I can go back and actually get the code going, try and get something up and running, and then, well, you're probably gonna see a mention of that on the forum or directly on the download page. And yeah, that's hopefully gonna be it. We're gonna get to close that issue and make it a lot easier for folks to get started with Incus and IncusOS. Again, thanks a lot for watching. Really appreciate all of the questions and chat this week. It's been great, and I'll see you in the next one next week. Have a good one, everyone. Bye.